playground rules experts. Welcome to our show.
Hey Mark, how you been lately?
Hey Eric, what's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Not much. Just here hanging out in Atlanta. Looking forward to having a great conversation like we had a few weeks ago. I think it's a conversation that everyone's going to want to hear. You and I normally talk about stuff like leadership and sports and the impact of that and what motivates different athletes to work well with each other versus others that don't seem to cooperate as well. I think the Chicago Blackhawks had a game recently, and I understand that they've had a slow streak. Wanted you to comment on what do you think they did different this time to have different results?
That's a good question, actually. So they had a game last night, and they were winning 3-1. They were losing, 3-1 going into the third period. For those of you folks who are not hockey fans, hockey has three 20-minute periods that make up a 1 hour of play total. And the Blackhawks were losing 3-1 and kind of playing a mediocre game going into the third period. But then after that, they turned it around. And the thing is, I didn't see the entire game last night, in all honesty, so it's not really my place to comment on what happened too much. However, what I did observe, sometimes you just kind of notice a change in a team is even in the body language. Something like where they were kind of maybe a little bit sluggish before or maybe not totally engaged, and then all of a sudden came out in the third period, started to go ahead and, defend well against their man, engaging physically, talking more on the bench. Sometimes you're in a conversation with somebody, you can tell when somebody is kind of half in, half out, maybe they're on their phone a little bit. In this case, I think the Blackhawks finally engaged and they play with some energy. And they pulled it off. They won 4-3 yesterday against Buffalo.
So pound for pound, this kind of ties into our team dynamic conversation we had a while ago, which I think was very interesting. Which team has superior athletes? So in other words, you think this victory that the Chicago Blackhawks pulled off was more a matter of superior system, or do they have more stars in their rank and file?
Good question. I think it's I wouldn't necessarily say superior system, and the stars, I've mentioned before, they do definitely have some stars, but those guys are kind of like not as starish as they used to be, if we can use such a word. They're kind of like on the last part of their career, even though they're still good players. So I wouldn't say star power in the system was not that much difference. Maybe they seem a little bit more committed to it. I think it was just mojo and energy. I mean, sometimes you just see, miraculous things happen in life that happen outside of a set of rules or outside of a particular system. And I think they just got some good mojo and some energy, and they got it together, and they turned it around. So that was pretty cool.
Do you think either of those teams have a Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant type?
One guy in the Blackhawks, Patrick Kane, is in the United States Hockey Hall of Fame. He's one of the best players in hockey players in USA hockey history. However, like I said, he's definitely not the player that he was now. Is that because he's physically slowing down? Is it because he's been on a team that's gone through some tough times? Is it a morale thing? I believe he just had his first kid with his wife, so maybe he's not spending as much time at the rink. He's spending more time at home. I'm not really sure what it is, but he hasn't been quite himself this year. But I would say, this season, he's probably the closest guy the Blackhawks have to Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant type, though still not quite on that level. When you're alluding to the NBA, those guys and those basketball players were something special. And of course, with Kobe, his passing, may rest in peace. He's one of the greats, one of the best ever.
Definitely. And what's the age of the star of Blackhawks? Is he like in his latter years like Michael Jordan when he returned to the Bulls for his second three-peat, or is he on the younger side?
So it's funny that you asked that because he is number 88. And 88 is the year that he was born, actually. So his jersey number matches the year that he was born, which is pretty cool that he's done that through the years. And me being the hockey nerd and the Blackhawks nerd, I know that fact. So it's always easy for me to calculate his age. So that means that he's November of 88, so that would put him at 34 years old as of today's podcast. What's today? January. My local time here is 10:58 p.m. right now. So today is January 18th, 2023. And yeah, that would make, and he is 34 years old.
34 years old, okay. When Michael Jordan returned for his second three-peat, was he around the same age, I think? Or was he a little older?
I think that he probably returned around the same time. For some reason, I don't know why. I'd have to do a fact check on this. I know all you fact checkers out there, you guys are going to love to fact check me on this one. So that's my disclaimer. You might have to fact check me on this. But I believe that Michael Jordan was born in either 63 or 64. I think he played 2 years at the University of North Carolina. And before he started with the Bulls, that was probably in 83 or 84. And I think that Jordan would have probably been, I'm going to say, somewhere in his mid-30s by the time the next three-peat started, maybe like 33 or something. If I had to take a wild guess, again, fact checkers, you'll probably beat me to it. I think that he was probably about 33 years old, maybe 34.
Yeah, so, I'm as you know, a Little League coach, soccer and basketball, and I've always been very compelled about what makes certain teams more effective than others. You see some teams that have a lot of stars, but they don't seem to do well, and then teams that have some stars but a superior system seem to outplay those that are just superior athletes. With all respect due to Kobe Bryant, I wanted to speak a little bit about what your opinion is as far as what is the parallel between Kobe Bryant when he was playing the more seasoned team playing Michael Jordan and the Michael Jordan at the beginning of his career?
That is a great, great question. I know a decent amount about basketball. I've followed a little bit of it through the years, and of course, as people will get to know in our program, I'm definitely the bigger hockey guy. But as far as the circumstances, if I remember correctly, I think that Kobe came into an okay team when he started in the late 90s or thereabouts. I don't think the Lakers were too bad. Maybe they were kind of mediocre. I think when Jordan joined the Bulls, if I remember right, they weren't a very good team. I think, in fact, there was a lot of empty seats and that kind of stuff. So the Bulls were pretty bad, to my recollection. So I think that Kobe may have come into a mediocre team when he was first joined the league, whereas Jordan came into a pretty bad team. Again, fact checkers, get your keyboards out. But yeah, that's the way that I remember it, and I think that if I remember right, the Bulls coach at that time was Doug Collins, and I'm not really sure if Doug Collins was known for being me being from the Chicago area. I'm not sure if Doug Collins was known for being the guy with really that strong of a system, more kind of like a player's coach, the guy that everybody seemed to like. But yeah, I probably didn't know enough about basketball at the time. I was still a little kid, and I didn't know a ton about basketball at the time to really be able to say what exactly the Bulls system was. Maybe I'm not enough of a basketball historian, but growing up in the Chicago area, I do definitely have to say that, I don't think that Jordan came into a very good team, and even if they did have a specific system they were adhering to, I don't think it was very noteworthy, whatever that system was. In fact, I'll go off and say that I'll one up myself, and I'll say most people in the 1980s, around that time, were paying attention to the Mike Ditka Chicago Bears. Not to say I got started off on a tangent, but 1984, 85, you know what I'm saying? That was the Super Bowl teams, and you definitely know they had a system. They had one of the best defenses ever. But back to the Bulls, they weren't known for. I don't think they were known for their system at that time. They just had a few good players and mostly empty seats, and a guy who probably many people thought of as the nice guy and the player's coach.
Definitely. So, what are your comments on a superior system versus the player's willingness to play in that system? Like, in other words, you can have a winning formula, but if people don't buy into it, it's probably not going to work. What do you think some of the challenges Phil Jackson had as far as convincing both the Bulls during his tenure there and the Lakers during his tenure there to convince these stars that the only way to victory is working together?
Well, that's an excellent question, and I'll tell you this much, is that, you and me being the sports guys that we are, and by the way, for everyone to know, this is one of our many topics we're going to cover, sports, team building, teamwork, and that kind of thing. We're going to cover a whole bunch of topics. Today our topic happens to be sports, but while we're going off on a sports tangent, it allows me to, or going, doing a sports topic, I should say, it allows me to be the, kind of the nerd that I am to a degree, and the enthusiast. And
You'll be nice. We'll call you the resident expert.
Yeah, exactly. The resident expert who's outside of his residence right now. Haha. Okay, you can hear the booze. But no, in all seriousness, though, yeah. Like I said, definitely know a lot about hockey, and like I said, growing up in the Chicago area, yeah, you get to learn a lot about the other sports too. And Chicago, in my opinion, a lot of people argue with me. For me, it's been the greatest sports city in the world up until recently, where we've been pretty bad. But anyway, all biases aside, back to your original question. By the time that Phil Jackson had joined the Lakers, I believe that was in the late 90s, when Kobe was getting seasoned and Shaquille O'Neal was over there and everything, he already had a lot of credentials. So by the time that he had the credentials, it was a little bit easier to go ahead, as a championship coach, 6-time championship coach. It was pretty easy, I think, or not easy, but let's say easier for people to go ahead, to get people to buy into the system. It's like, hey, this guy's won 6 championships, and you got the likes of Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman to get along. So how in the world did he pull it off with all those superstars, all that ego, all those egos and everything? So at that point, I think it was easier. But if we go back to the Bulls, I think that there's been several books written about this topic. It's hard to cover in one topic about Michael Jordan, the Bulls of the late 80s and the early 90s. There's something that Phil Jackson was able to do. Was it, and to your points, to your question, was it some kind of intangible? Was it some kind of kumbaya zen thing that Phil Jackson was perhaps known for? Like, hey guys, why can't we all just get along? And hey, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, perhaps we can win a championship while we're at it. So, it's really interesting. I think that unless you talk to the players in the Bulls, I think that many of us to this day as Bulls fans are baffled on how he put it up. He definitely had a system, the triangle system that was put into place by his coaches, by his assistant coaches. But what's really interesting is that how did he get all those egos to get along? How did he get everyone to do it? Something spiritual, something otherworldly, universal. He's really into Zen and Zen Buddhism, to my understanding. So it's really quite the phenomenon of how he pulled that off. Great talent, and made them all work together and even get along most of the time, seemingly.
So I'm wondering, with the disclaimer of basketball not being your sport per se, I wonder what it was about him that made him a compelling choice to give the opportunity to lead the Bulls.
Absolutely. And, like you said, I really like what you just said, because that kind of takes some of the heat off of me, because, anybody who's listening to our show, and by the way, thank you all for joining us, I would just say that, we're all fans, of whatever we're fans of. And the thing is that I think that it's important to know that everyone's opinion counts. I mean, and this is just an angle of one, a young man who grew up in the Chicago area and was a fan of Chicago teams. So nothing I'm saying is either right or wrong. It's all debatable. I just wanted to put that out there. And like we said, some of it needs to be probably fact checked. But when asked my opinion, that's something that I think a lot of us try to answer. And when you and I were having a conversation the other day, off the air, and it's just like, why do certain people get a chance and other people don't. Like, why did Phil Jackson get that chance? To my understanding, Phil Jackson may have even been not even a starter on those Knicks.
No, he was what they call a role player.
Right, role player. So he's coming off the bench, and that's a very important player. And sometimes those players make the best coaches. But why specifically out of Phil Jackson, to your point, does everybody get a chance? Or does he get a chance? There's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacks, is what we like to call them in sports, or people who like to hash after the fact, say, hey, you know what, that kind of talent, you know, if I had that kind of talent, I could have won a championship with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman and all those guys just by sitting at home and eating popcorn on the couch and just letting them do their thing. There's a lot of guys that would probably come back and say, hey, you know what, anybody could have done that. But you know what? He's the one who did it, and he deserves some credit. And why was he the one? I would love to know. He definitely has some kind of personal charm. He seems to, if anyone's paid close attention to his interviews, again, this is just my opinion, he seems to have some kind of very calming kind of strength and confidence about him. You know, so maybe some coaches are more fiery and that kind of thing. He did get fiery, but he could go ahead and find a way to communicate his points, seemingly, in a strong, but, you know, kind of a, you know, assertive but calm manner, where it didn't seem to induce panic. In fact, it seemed to provoke a level of confidence from the organization, from the players, from fans like myself. And he definitely has a quality about him. And for those of us who are spiritual, and I'm thinking that we have some people who are listening to our program who are spiritual people, regardless of what your religious preferences, your denomination. I'm just talking about spiritual, believing in the world, believing in the universe, believing in energy. There's some, I think that Phil Jackson's thing, like I said before, was Zen Buddhism, or Zen, state of Zen, spirituality. And I think that there's something that he had, kind of like a spiritual, maybe effect or guidance of some kind. Almost like the guy found a way to have a spiritual center where he was getting help from the universe. And maybe that sounds far-fetched to some people. And that's okay. I'm not saying that that's definitely what it was, but, if we're asking one fan here what it was part basketball, maybe it was part something else.
Definitely. So, the reason why I ask this question is because there are plenty of teams that have had superior talent but weren't able to really pull off the championship. If you look at John Stockton and Karl Malone, you look at teams like the Buffalo Bills, Jim Kelly, they were amazing squads, but they didn't have that intangible, which is, in my mind, leadership. Growing up, as we all were, I was a big Michael Jordan fan. And then, people, I guess, that are younger than me were Kobe Bryant fans or LeBron James fans. But it seems like in this day and age, coaches and leaders get not much of the credit. And it's kind of funny also that even though Phil Jackson was the top dog, the head coach, he was not responsible for the tactics of the Bulls. He was more a team builder. Would you be that it's an accurate statement?
That was my understanding as well. I think that, to your point, I think that the assistant coaches, my understanding was that they were more of the tactic and system guys. And Phil was kind of like the glue that held all of it together. So the first...
So it seems like maybe getting along is probably the first step before you can even consider trying to win.
Absolutely. Without a doubt.
So if you were the coach of the Blackhawks, what would you do differently in the current format?
That's a great question. And that's a question that I put a lot of thought into and don't necessarily have a concrete answer for. But the thing is, today's athlete needs to be treated kind of delicately. They used to go ahead when I played hockey back in high school and college, for my school teams, and coaches didn't used to be afraid to punish us. bag skates, what they call it, with bags of pucks attached to us, all kinds of different, push-ups in the ice on your knuckles, which is definitely not easy, especially after practice. When you think about how slippery ice is, just a whole bunch of things. Punishment used to be okay in order to build the character of a team and to make them better. Now today's athletes are making a lot more money, and they have big egos, a lot of them, and coaches who try to, use punishment as a way of teaching, negative rewards, so to speak, if we can call it that. Those people don't seem to do so well. So even though my inclination sometimes is when I'm watching my favorite hockey team, my inclination is to go ahead and punish them, I think there's an approach where you just have to keep on restating the confidence, restating commitment to the plan. Guys, for us to have a chance, nobody's expecting us to finish in first place. We are the underdog this year. We've lost a lot of players. We've got a lot of new talent coming in. Let's go ahead and surprise them. Let's go ahead and punish them. You know what I'm saying? They try to make a play, we go ahead, and we knock somebody on their behind. Even if they do score a goal, make them pay the price for it. Make them work for it. Trust in each other. Trust if you guys go ahead and somebody makes a mistake, that you're going to go ahead and you're going to come back the next shift and you're going to do something. You're going to do something right. Like in my own experience, I played a college club at the University of DePaul, which is in Chicago, which is ACHA, American College Hockey Association team. My first shift with that team, I got knocked on my butt. This puck was coming really slowly towards me, and I got knocked down really hard by a guy from Northern Michigan University, and those guys can hit. Next shift, I come out and I score a goal. True story. So what ends up happening is you got to persevere. You got to be able to take one on the chin. You got to believe in each other. Even if you don't get immediate results, you stay with the system, kind of like you with your soccer teams. You've taught those guys to go ahead and believe in each other. Hey, you lose a game, you allow a goal, that kind of thing. Just come back. You know what I'm saying? Be strong. You can't give up on the plan because of one bad shift or one bad quarter or period or one bad game. You really have to say, hey guys, let's give this a chance. Let's give this a chance to work. And I think that applies to anything in life. Who gets relationships right from the first time? Or who goes ahead and gets their first job and makes a career out of it? They go ahead and they figure out what they did wrong. They make the adjustments. And I think that applies to anything in life. So you say, hey guys, just believe in the system. Just give it a chance to succeed and come back. And if it doesn't go well, just come back and just push harder next time and believe in each other. And, hopefully good things will happen. If not after games 1 and 2, then maybe games 3 or 4, we'll start to see really good things happening.
So, based on what you just said right now, it seems like even though Phil Jackson is one of the older coaches, at least compared to current day athletics, it seems like he had a newer age philosophy of hyping on consciousness versus maybe the practical application of punishment.
Absolutely. Because the thing is, and again, I'm not trying to say that I know those guys personally because I don't. Imagine going ahead. I mean, hockey, of course, the Blackhawks have had several coaches which have harped on punishments and saying, hey, oh, you guys played badly. Oh, you're going to be in for it next practice. You just watch kind of mentality. And that worked for a while.
You guys are going to run until I get tired after that before.
Exactly. And then what ends up happening, imagine trying to go ahead and punish Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman. Like, come on. It's kind of like maybe under different circumstances that would have worked when they were younger and that kind of thing. But these guys were already seasoned veterans and that kind of thing. You're not going to go ahead. I really don't think they're going to go ahead and make Dennis Rodman, who sometimes wouldn't even show up to practices, will be in trouble with the law and that kind of thing during the season. That you're going to go ahead and get a lot out of him by making him doing push-ups on his knuckles and wind sprints. I think there's a specific way that Dennis Rodman, being the great basketball player that he was, you would have to go ahead and say, hey, Dennis, listen, if we can go ahead and maybe cut out some of the commotion, cut out some of the drama, cut out some of the flair. Just go ahead and do what you do best. Challenge the player with the ball. You know, block shots, steals, play kind of physical without getting too many fouls. Just keep on reminding him to keep his eye on the ball. If I can use a baseball analogy there, and keep on giving your vote of confidence. Hey man, we're committed to you. This is why you're here, because we believe in you. Punishing with a guy like Dennis Rodman, I don't think that'll work, and I don't think that'll work much with Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan either.
Yeah. So thinking back in your athletic history, what are some coaches that may stand out to you that maybe did things the more correct way that we're talking about, trying to cultivate the consciousness of a team versus the more aggressive approach of win sprints till you get it?
You know, you got to always look at the dynasties and who their coaches were, especially in the salary cap era where people cannot go ahead and sign all the same players they had the previous year. It's very, very hard to build a dynasty, and when they do, like the Pittsburgh Penguins of hockey for a few years, or like we talked about the LA Lakers and the Chicago Bulls in basketball. The San Antonio Spurs won a lot of championships. I'm sure you probably remember. I don't remember if any of them offhand were back-to-back, but they went ahead and they won a large number of championships over a short amount of time with those guys. They were absolutely positively successful, and Greg Popovich in San Antonio was known as a player's coach, and to my understanding. And I really think that these dynasties or these teams that win multiple championships, I think these days you're starting to see that they a lot of times have the coach who's really likable. The Blackhawks who won 3 championships in 6 years. Joel Quenneville, Coach Q, he always looks like he's kind of grumbling on the bench. He never looks like he's too happy, but that became part of his charm and his appeal. Once he won the championships, he raised the trophy above his head. He was like a kid. He was outward expression of joy all the way. So I think that the guys, they call him Coach Q. I think the guys really like him, even though he could be a little assertive and a little tough. I think he had the players' respect, and I think that, you know, it's a good, firm kind of like balance between being assertive and methodical at the same time as being kind of the players' coach and being approachable. I think that's what works. I think that, you know, they always used to say it's more important to be feared than to be liked. I think that today's athlete has to like you in addition to fear you, or maybe not fear you at all, just respect you and like you more than fear you. And that's how you get results these days.
You know, so as a coach, I have seen that, you know, there are advantages to having a solid system. And in fact, solid systems many times can beat teams that have better pound-for-pound athletes. And of course, you've spoken about how airtight the Chicago Bulls system was back in the Phil Jackson era. From a salary cap perspective, what talent could the Bulls have afforded to get rid of and still been able to pull off what they pulled off?
That is an excellent question. That is a heck of a hypothetical.
No question.
That's the million-dollar question. You always ask the good questions, man. I'm glad to have been your buddy for this long because you always ask the good questions, and you're very good at stumping me. Not that I'm really stumped
on
right
live radio, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, on a podcast, no less. I thought we had an agreement that you're going to go ahead and make me look good, but as soon as we go ahead and hit the record button for all these wonderful people who join our podcast today, he asks me the questions where it's impossible to answer. But it's okay, young man. You and me will have words off the air. But in all seriousness, though, that is a very good question. It is so hard to imagine who the Bulls could have lost. You know, it's like you have those championship teams and you wonder, it's like, hey, could they have done it with a different supporting cast? I'd like to think that the answer is yes. But would it have been more difficult, perhaps? Would it have taken longer? Would they have won 3 championships in a row? Probably not. I mean, I think the best example of that I can think of is John Paxson. And you and I chatted about John Paxson, I think, a few weeks ago. John Paxson was a very important player in the Bulls' first 3 championships. And and prior to that, and he was with the Bulls since the mid-'80s. And could have somebody else been there for that time and the Bulls still won those championships? Sure. I'm sure they probably could have, but it happened to be John Paxson, the guy that was there, and a great outside shooter. Many people argue that, maybe he's kind of a one-dimensional player, but in my opinion, I always liked him, hit the big shots, great three-point shooter, and he deserved to be there. So I think just the fact that he was there, coming to the court every day in the same, practice facilities in the same city, and that kind of thing. Knowing Michael Jordan for as long as he had, and that kind of thing. Obviously, even if they weren't best friends, they developed some kind of relationship. I think there's some kind of routine that these guys get into, and I think that it gives them a chance as role players to go ahead and succeed. Maybe other role players wouldn't. So maybe they went ahead and they took a great three-point shooter from another team and brought him in, Michael Jordan's first championship, whatever, 91, I believe, and they wouldn't have had that same success, but there's some chemistry, maybe on the court, off the court, that a guy like John Paxson would have had with Jordan, and a level of comfort and at least familiarity. And I think that put John Paxson as a very important member of the supporting cast. And the supporting cast, by the way, is meant with all due respect, supporting cast for a champion is very, very important. And John Paxson was put in a position to succeed, and he played his role very well and hit some clutch shots, and just a really likable, great guy who became general manager of the Bulls years down the road.
So do you think that salary caps, in your opinion, hurt the league more than they help?
If everything that you asked me before is the $1 million question, that's the $1 billion question right there. I'm pretty sure I know, knowing you, you're probably going to ask me a $1 trillion question. But
yes, sir.
Because you do that, and that's awesome. I love to be challenged on that with these kind of questions. The thing is, there's the salary cap debates for big sports fans like you and me is one that has existed for decades. If you do have a salary cap, then there's more parity in the league, and more teams have the chance to win. Even especially in smaller markets, if you don't have the salary cap in the league, those teams don't have the chance, and you end up. But at the same time, you're able to go ahead and retain players. Dynasties are more common in that situation. So there's arguments that go both ways. Me personally, I don't feel strongly one way or the other, but if I had to pick one, it's kind of like a tiebreaker, because like I said, there's very strong arguments both ways, very strong. That would probably take 5 shows like this to cover. I would say that I like the lack of a salary cap, mainly from the standpoint that you keep the guys together. I like it that the guys get to stay together, that the team can go ahead without an artificial restriction, keep players that have been successful together. They can keep those guys together without guys having to move on for financial reasons. I mean, guys that are on your team, they're your brothers. You know what I'm saying? You do everything together, especially when you're out on the road. You're eating it together. You're rooming it together. You're practicing it together. You're in the games together. You're probably bickering it together. You're doing everything you do with all your best friends, probably with your siblings. And I like the idea of teams staying together. If I was a professional athlete on a sports team and they told me, hey, sorry, man, your best buddy, your guy who you just won 3 championships with, has got to go because we can't afford to keep him under the salary cap, I wouldn't be too happy about the salary cap at that moment. I'd probably be pouting.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So it seems like the salary cap is there to, I guess, keep things fair, but that's kind of an unfair advantage to coaches. It's almost like the message is we want our coaches to produce winning teams and not championship teams.
Yeah, in some cases that's true. I think that there's another age-old debate. Teams will always talk about in the press and that kind of thing. Let's go ahead. We all have one goal here, and one goal is to win the championship. We'll do whatever is necessary to win the championship. The reality of it, like you and I always talk about, is that not that many teams do win the championship, and most players go through their lives, their professional careers, without winning a championship. Perhaps even a lot of times their amateur careers. And I think that from a business standpoint, forgive me if this sounds a little cynical, but we do know that business is a huge deal. Sports is entertainment, it's competition, but it's ultimately a business. Professional sports, that. If you have a competitive team, you're going to go ahead, in most cases, in most markets, you're going to be selling out the games. So as long as your team is a winning team, you're going to be selling out the games. As long as the fans perceive that you have a chance to win every year, even if you don't win, for most cases, they're going to keep on coming back. And there's literally dozens of examples of that. However, in the instance that the perception is there that your team is no longer interested in winning, or is interested in winning but way down the road, like the Chicago Blackhawks case in point, many are saying are trying to have the worst team possible this year so they can get a higher draft pick, so they can win down the road, but not today. We're going to win next year or in 5 years, but we're not winning today. So what ends up happening is that that's discouraging to a lot of fans. They want to win right now, and if they're going to be spending hundreds of dollars to go to a sporting event, professional sporting events, they want the team to have a legitimate chance to win. I mean, that's a tough sell, saying, "Hey, your team's going to suck this year, but yeah, come on out and see them play anyway. You know, we'll get we've got a raffle, and $7 hot dogs."
So it's an expensive lottery ticket.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is this: is that and people might not like me for saying it, but as you guys will learn on this show, I say a lot of things. Not worrying about being liked. My opinion is just no more valuable or less valuable than anyone else's, and hopefully most of you feel the same way. Is that I think a lot of times it's a perception thing. If they perceive that a team is in contention for winning, then they'll keep on coming to the games, even if they're not winning the championship. If they perceive they're in a rebuild, maybe they'll still keep on coming to games out of loyalty because they like the sport. But in general, you're going to see attendance figures go down, like they had with the Blackhawks last season. It used to be the Blackhawks had 10 to 12 years of consecutive sellouts, I believe. And now that sellout streak, I believe, was broken a year or two ago. No more, and they're still selling out some games like they did the other night, but in general, attendance is down thousands of fans because people are smart enough to know the team doesn't have a legitimate chance to win the championship. So I think that a lot of it has to do with fan perception and also how the team's leaders, management communicates with the teams and lets them know what to expect. By the time that Kyle Davidson and the Blackhawks issued the word rebuild to Blackhawks fans, a portion of them are like, all right, well, let's stick around and see what that means and how well this goes and see if this rebuild is successful. And a couple of them were just like, adios, man. We'll see you in 5 years. I'm not going to spend my time watching you guys on TV, and I sure as hell ain't going to a game.
So you think the Blackhawks have to wait as long as a rebuild implies, or are there things they could do right now to be a more effective unit?
Well, that's one of those questions that the team leaders have been asking too amongst the players. Two of their best players for these many years, so I've been speaking about Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews. Jonathan Toews believes that a rebuild can happen and teams can be very successful in turning it around in a couple of seasons. For example, he was part of a rebuild when he joined the league in 2007, and by 2010, 3 years later, less than 3 years later actually, he'd already won a championship. So he's taking his time and kind of seeing, maybe like you said, the Michael Jordan example, hey, maybe I'm 34 years old right now, but I can still win a championship with this team if a rebuild turns around pretty quickly. So I think that it really just depends on who you ask. I think that some guys are probably a little bit more cynical or consider themselves to be more realistic. They're like, hey guys, come on, let's jet because let's leave town because this team is not winning a championship anytime soon. And so I thought, oh, wait a minute, hold on. We still got a good group of guys here. We got some new talent coming in, some good young talents. Hey, you know what? We can go ahead and we can surprise a lot of people by winning. The element of surprise, too. You come in as the underdog, everybody kind of like, the Blackhawks, yeah, last place, they suck, blah, blah, blah. Then they go ahead and they beat some really good teams lately. Even won 4 of their 5 last games because teams don't take them seriously. They can go ahead and nip them in the butt just like a mean dog. And they can surprise people if teams aren't ready to play them. So it just depends on who you ask. I think the most cynical players, like I said, will want to leave town. The guys who are believers and want to stay in the same city, have their teams established, have their family established in that city, love the city of Chicago, whatever other city they play in, they might be like, you know what, I might stick around a little bit to see how things play out here.
Are there players on the bench of the Blackhawks that should be in the starting lineup?
Well, starters, that's another very interesting question from that is, I think, appeals to a lot of casual hockey fans. So what's interesting is that hockey, because the shifts are so short, it's usually a minute or less in a 60-minute game, and they change pretty quickly. It's not starters in the same sense that you'd have in basketball. I'm really glad that you actually asked that question, because that's a good educational. This is a great teaching moment for people who are maybe not hockey fans, who might be passively interested, or maybe a casual fan. Whoever starts the game is important, but they're not going to be out there that long. Within a minute, they're going to switch it up to their second line. So let's say Blackhawks start out, they have 4 lines of forwards, and the first line, they can go ahead and start the game with them, but they're going to be off the ice in a minute anyway because they're going to be winded. Hockey is such a cardio sport and such a fast sport. So
there's no players that get more time than others in hockey?
Well, they get
more, the goalie, maybe.
They get more time than others. That is probably hockey's version of a starter. But at the same time, though, coaches will mix it up. Like, they'll go ahead, they'll say, you know, our starters haven't been scoring much lately, and they seem like they're kind of in a comfort zone. They'll put out, instead of the first line, they'll put out the third or fourth line. The fourth line is otherwise known in hockey a lot of times as the energy line. And the energy line is going to go ahead and do some forechecking. They're going to go ahead and do some hitting. They might even do some fighting. And they might get the fans energized. They might say, you know what? Instead of bringing out all these $10 million, they're not going to come out and say this, of course. Instead of bringing out these $10 million per year prima donna superstar types who are going through the motions, let's go ahead and bring out a few guys who are up from the minors, making less than $1 million per year, who are trying to make the team, and they're going to go ahead and be out for blood. They're going to knock some people on their butts, and they're going to go ahead and they're going to, have some fisticuffs, and they're going to get excited, and the fans are going to love it too. And sometimes the coach will do that as a spark, and it works really well. But as far as starters go, I guess that's kind of like as you alluded to, that's the starter version of hockey, is going to be the one who plays more minutes than the other guy, even though he may not actually be the one to start the game.
And you being a sports fan, do you think that sports fans prefer to see their team win or prefer to see their stars play? The reason why I ask that question is because it seems like there's a little bit of undue pressure on coaches probably to sometimes nix what they know is going to be their winning setup to kind of please the fans, so to speak. That's one of the things I think that made Phil Jackson be as great as he was is, yeah, everyone went to see Michael Jordan, but he did not develop his system around Michael Jordan. He developed a system around everyone touching the ball.
Absolutely.
Do you see similar things like that in hockey, or is it totally different?
You know, that's a very good question. There's a few things that you said in there, so I'll get to the first part of it. It depends. I think that what you said, the first part of that, really amounts to what kind of fan somebody is. If you're a diehard fan, how well your team is doing, whatever sport you follow, is really going to make up a portion of your happiness. I mean, let's just tell it like it is. If you see your team playing badly and they keep on sucking year after year, sorry if I can't use that word in the air, but I just did. At some point, it's going to be deflating to you. I mean, how many times are you going to go ahead and turn off the TV set for the night or walk away from the rink and be like, oh man, that was a bad game. Oh man, we got blown out. We got our butts kicked. And then it's kind of like demoralizing. So if you follow a team closely, I think that's a very fair question. You want them to win, and it's very important for them to win games regardless of being superstars. How many superstars they have on the team. Now, the more casual fan, I really believe that that superstars bring the more casual fans to the rink. So, for example, let's say that I'm a bigger, you're a casual hockey fan, if I could say as much, you know something about it, but at the same time, you know, and I'm more of a diehard. If I told you to invite you to a Blackhawks game and there's no real star power there, you'd probably go just for the sake of, you know, you like sports, company, that kind of thing. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you may or may not decline, depending on what you had to you know, do that night. But let's say, for example, as a casual fan and as a hypothetical, if I told you 40 years ago, hey, listen, man, I got tickets to the Blackhawks game tonight, and they're going to play against Wayne Gretzky and his team, the Edmonton Oilers. As a casual fan, would you be more inclined to see make plans to see a game that involves Wayne Gretzky or another superstar rather than a game that did not involve any superstars?
I guess as somebody who would be drawn to the name, then yes, I'd like to see him play just for historic value.
Exactly. So the casual fans, I think they're behinds going to the seats. In a lot of cases, I'm not going to make generalizations. That's just an observation. I don't like to make too many generalizations. I guess we all do make generalizations on some level, but at the same time, well, there's another generalization. Woohoo! But in all seriousness, though, I think that the casual fan will be drawn by the big names, the Michael Jordans, and the Scottie Pippens, even Charles Barkley, guys like that made a name for themselves, the Kobe Bryants. And it's like, oh man, I can see Kobe Bryant play tonight, or Michael Jordan or somebody. But I think that if you're following a team, regardless of the number of superstars that team has, if you really, really care about how they're doing, you're loyal to that team, I think you'll go ahead and stick with them. In a lot of cases, the highs and the lows, and for a while, as a Blackhawks fan, like I said, in recent years, in 2010 to 2015, we had a heck of a lot of highs. Now we have mostly lows, but you'll stick with them, and because you're more committed, you're more vested into it. That's the team that you've been following, and that's a portion of your life. Like I said, it's a portion of your happiness. If I went to if I was a casual fan of a team in another city, maybe just liked a few of their players or whatever, without being superstars, I'd be kind of like, oh, okay, cool. Went to the game, I got to see them. Whether or not of course, I want them to win, but if they don't win, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Doesn't really have a lot to do with my happiness. So, can I bug you with a quick story about a hockey system here that worked really well?
Go ahead. Did it belong to the Blackhawks or another team?
Nope. It was one of the most interesting and surprising championships in National Hockey League history. It was a lockout-shortened season in 1995. And back to my point about New Jersey, who had the superstar goaltender, maybe at the time they didn't even know if he was a superstar, maybe made himself a superstar that year, who had pretty much a system which is called the neutral zone trap. It's pretty much a basic, pretty much kind of like, in layman's terms, for people who are not hockey fans, make the game as boring and predictable as possible. Make it so the other team knows that they can't make a lot of offensive plays. And they have to go ahead. They have to dump the puck in behind you rather than trying to skate around you. Make sure that if somebody does have the puck, that you go ahead and knock them on their behinds. And not that knocking anybody on their behinds is boring, but if you're looking for some really aesthetic kind of hockey, New Jersey wasn't providing a ton of that. So New Jersey played against the Detroit Red Wings, which were absolutely phenomenal, talented team in 1995. And for anybody who's watching that, who is a hockey fan of any kind, casual or diehard or otherwise, Detroit was favored to win that championship by a large margin. It's like New Jersey, another Cinderella story. They don't have any really great players or big scorers or whatever. New Jersey, with their neutral zone trap, played such a physical and high energy and in-your-face kind of game that every single time that the Detroit Red Wings touched the puck, it seemed like they were getting knocked down. They were getting hurt. All of their kind of beautiful finesse, passing, figure skating maneuvers seemed to completely go down the drain. Where they had been skating circles around the other team, New Jersey made them pay for every single inch, it seemed like. And not only did New Jersey upset the Detroit Red Wings, and beat them for the championship for the Stanley Cup that year. They swept them. They beat them in all 4 games. And if I remember right, in none of those games did Detroit even seem to even have a fighting chance. I mean, they got their butts handed to them. Now, how the heck does the team that has all of the amazing talent in the world, like Detroit, lose to a whole bunch of, backyard, barnyard kind of hockey players who are not interested in anything seemingly other than knocking them on their behinds and leaving them with bumps and bruises? And they were just too much to handle. That system, that defensive system, which started not only at their own blue line, not only their own zone, it started at midfield or mid-ice.
So it's not like the times when Dennis Rodman's Pistons upset the Bulls with their hard-hitting system.
Exactly. They were very physical. Yep. I would say that New Jersey team was probably, ironically, against Detroit of the NHL, the National Hockey League, was probably, the hockey's version of the Detroit Pistons, who were extremely physical and knock people down and that kind of thing, and then they complained about why they were getting fouled afterwards. So I would say that Detroit, the Pistons, probably had a lot of talent, in all fairness, to go with. John Sally, Isaiah Thomas, Mark Aguirre, Dennis Rodman, Bill Lambier. The list goes on and on and on for you Detroit fans. I'm sorry if I missed anybody, but then you're Detroit fans, so I'm not that sorry. But in all seriousness, hey, we're just having fun here. But in all seriousness, though, those were some great Pistons teams, yeah. But they had some talent to go with it. Maybe not on the level of Michael Jordan, but at the same time, they had some talent to go with it. New Jersey, I'm telling you, no household names whatsoever, except maybe their goalie in later years. And it was just their defense started in the offensive zone. They played defense and played physical on every inch of the ice, and they absolutely demolished Detroit. And it was just absolutely, positively mind-blowing. Mind-blowing that that system could go ahead and handily beat all the talents that any hockey team in history could probably ask for. I mean, I'm talking about international talents from Czech Republic, Sweden, Finland, from Russia. Just all the talent in the world on the Detroit team. No salary cap even. Expected to win it all, and they were just completely and utterly had their behinds handed to them by a no-namer New Jersey team who's committed to that system and played every square inch of that system. That's the best hockey example of playing the right way I've ever heard of in history. Now, don't get me wrong. I love to see good finesse hockey with beautiful finesse plays and everything. But when you see those prima donna types skating, doing figure skating and making all those beautiful passes and everything, you see some kind of barnyard guy knocking them on their behinds, taking the puck away and scoring a goal. You got to root for the underdog there a little bit. That was a case where the underdog beat the Giants,
So if you're a first-time listener to this conversation,
yeah,
what questions do you think you would have?
Well, one of the questions I would have, I mean this in a half-serious way, because we're allowed to be half-serious. I would ask, hey, man, are you guys going to talk about my team too? Because you guys have been talking about the Bulls and the Blackhawks a whole lot, but how about talking about my team? Like, I happen to be a Steelers fan, or I happen to be, New York Knicks fan or whomever. Maybe we wouldn't touch on them enough, but yeah, this program is a lot about, life analogies and metaphors. So number one is, hey, what other sports are we going to talk about? What other teams are we going to talk about? But even on a bigger scale than that, this is not a program that's only about sports. It's about life, and sports happens to be the topic for the day. And I think we're going to touch on a lot of stuff which is accessible to many people, whether they're sports fans or not. And we'd love to have all you guys tune in. And we'll even have a suggestion box and in the future, which I'd like to do. I mentioned that to you before, that people can ask questions about a specific, context of an episode that we're doing or a podcast that we're doing, or make suggestions for future podcasts. So, like I said, to me, this show is about anything and everything. So those would be my first two questions. Number one, what are you going to talk about, my team or my sport? And number two, are we going to talk about something other than just sports? For those of us who aren't just sports fans, the answer to both questions, I presume, would be yes. Well, I'd love to cover anything and everything with you, and you've been a good friend of mine for many years, and I appreciate the respect for my opinion. I respect your insight into everything, and I look forward to covering a whole scope of different topics.
Cool. So to close out, what questions would you ask me? I think I've asked you most of the hard $1 million questions.
Absolutely. In fact, I always considered you to be the subject matter experts. And for today's session, today's podcast, I got to be the subject matter expert. So maybe I kind of feel like Halloween came early this year. I got to dress up and wear my subject matter expert hat. But no, in all seriousness, I've definitely followed hockey for many years. Do you think it's important for our listeners and maybe future viewers to know kind of like more about us, who we are? Will they find that out through the podcast? Will they find that out just to get to know us in that context? Or do you think we can give them a little bit of a background on who we are? Maybe we'll save it for next time? What's your thinking on that?
Yeah, we can give a little background on each other if you'd like.
Absolutely. So tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself. Tell us about yourself. Well, what do you think is important that we know for this programming? And after today's podcast, which I think has been very successful, I hope people feel the same way. What reasons would listeners have to tune back in and listen to listen to you? Hopefully it's self-explanatory. And then what would you like for them to know about yourself?
Well, I guess for starters, I am very interested and compelled in the topics of leadership, team dynamics, what makes and motivates people to work together at high levels of effectiveness. I would like to also set the stage for our viewers or listeners to feel free to comment on their expertise and things we may have left out or things they may like us to comment on in later segments. It's really an open conversation. I've been coaching since 2018. I've been into leadership for over 20 years, and you're a really good friend. We had many great conversations, and I thought that the world would definitely benefit from being at the table for our conversations, which is one of the main ideas for this show. And don't think you have to be an expert to partake. There's a misconstrued notion that you have to be renowned or famous or have a resume to be able to comment on any given topic. But as you have heard, as you talk about people like Phil Jackson, you don't necessarily have to be a championship athlete or winner to have something to offer teams that are looking to be as successful as you've been able to lead. But I guess that's the basic gist of what I hope the listener walks away with and tunes in to us next time.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome. And we realize that really, as many people would say, sports is really a metaphor for life. Relationships, kinship, team building is a phrase you're going to hear a whole lot in our program, I imagine. And
yes, sir.
That's how all these things are done. So I think that we're going to have a little something for everybody. And like I said, we're going to set up at some point probably an email address or something along those lines. I mean, this is we're two guys who are I think we speak for both of us when I say we both have something to offer, and tuning into people just like us out there who are trying to make the right decisions, do the right things in life. Sometimes they need a sounding board, they need to be heard. Sometimes they feel like they need to listen to somebody else, just to know that they're not alone in their ways of thinking or in their challenges. It's been a tough time for our country, for the world, the last few years. I don't need to go down the list, but there's been war and pandemic, and and there's been friction in political and social factions. I think that, like I said, our show's something for everybody. There's nothing no viewpoints that you can have or opinion that you can share that would disqualify you or anyone else from being welcome on the show. I mean, of course, we want to have people to have some kind of moral compass, of course. We're not trying to have all the bad guys call in, but at the same time, I guess some people think that bad guys deserve a voice too, so heck, what is even a bad guy? It depends on who you ask. But yes, I think that everyone is welcome, and I want to make everyone feel welcome, and I'm excited to do this because it's my first go-around with the podcast, and to be able to do with one of my good friends. I have a million ideas, and we're just going to evolve as we go here, and it's an exciting time, and we've been talking about this for a while, so full speed ahead, brother. Let's keep at this and see where it goes.
Sounds great. So until next time.
You got it, sir. Have a good one.
Thanks.